Okay, welcome everybody. This is lesson 8.4, and this lesson we're going to kind of depart from the lines and the rays and the segments and the angles, and we're going to go to something a little bit more interesting. We're going to go to our first polygons, which are triangles. Okay. And basically all we're going to talk about in this particular lesson is how to name triangles. So think about, you know me, I have a first name and a last name. My name is Greg Gunn. Okay, so you've got a first name and a last name that go with that. Well, triangles are kind of the same kind of thing. So we've got two different ways we can classify triangles. Okay, so the first is by the angles. So there's basically, and for each of these there's three choices. Okay, we can have a triangle where each of the angles, if you look at them closely, is an acute angle. If all three angles are acute, then we call the triangle an acute triangle. And the symbol for triangle, just like we had a symbol for angle, it's just literally a little triangle. Okay. The second kind of triangle is a triangle that has a right angle. So just make sure it has a right angle. So put a little square box in there and finish it up. And this is called, of course, it's got a right angle. So guess what? It's called a right triangle. Pretty much it. All right. So the last one is, suppose my triangle has an obtuse angle right here. All right, so again, finish the triangle, and if it has an obtuse triangle, we call it, if it has an obtuse angle, we call it an obtuse triangle. So basically, in each of these cases, we name a triangle after its largest angle, because this is the only part that's a little confusing about this. You'll notice that in the right triangle, there are still two acute angles. So you can't say the definition of an acute triangle is one that has acute angles. All triangles are going to have two acute angles, no matter what. Okay, so it's only when the biggest angle, when the third angle is also acute, which in this case would be this one right here, okay, that we get an acute triangle. Okay, if the largest angle is a right triangle or a right angle, then we get a right triangle, and if the largest angle is an obtuse angle, then we get an obtuse triangle. Okay, so again, when you're classifying triangles by angles, it's either acute, right, or obtuse, and the way you tell is you look at the biggest of the angles. If the biggest angle is acute, it's acute. If it's right, it's right. If it's obtuse, it's obtuse. All right, so that's it for angles. That's one of the names for triangles. The second one is to classify the triangles by their sides. Okay, and the way we classify things by sides is we talk about how many sides are equal. Okay, so, and you've seen some of these terms before. So let's start first with the easiest triangle. And the easiest triangle is one where all three sides are the same length. Okay, and this is kind of a long name, but you've seen it before. It's called an equilateral. And that literally translates from the Greek to mean equal sides. Equilateral triangle. And an equilateral triangle is one where all three sides are equal. Now, this is the only one that gets a little tricky. An isosceles triangle. In an isosceles triangle, you have, and this is important, it's, first of all, it's spelled kind of weird. It's isos, which is a lot of times the abbreviation, and then C-E-L-E-S. Okay? Now, this is also, iso means same, and skeles means sides. So again, this kind of is like equilateral, but it's not saying all three sides are equal. It just is a triangle that has equal sides. And if you really get precise about it, it's actually at least two equal sides. So in essence, you can think of an equilateral triangle as a special kind of isosceles triangle. Any triangle at all that has equal sides is isosceles. Now, we go on a little bit further. If all three sides are equal, we call it equilateral. All right. Now, the opposite of isosceles, okay, is a scalene triangle. And in a scalene triangle, all three sides are different. You'll have a short side, a medium side, and a long side. So that's called scalene. And again, in a scalene triangle, you have no equal sides. So all triangles, in terms of their sides, have one of two names. They're either isosceles or they're scalene. Now, if they're isosceles, they might also be equilateral if the third side is also equal to the other two. That's it. Okay, so again, by angles we name them by their biggest angle. It's either acute, right, or obtuse. By sides, we name them by how many sides are equal. Okay, so it's either isosceles or scalene, and if it's isosceles, it might also be equilateral. Now, if it's equilateral, by the way, you don't have to bother saying isosceles. It's automatically implied. Okay, all right, so let's do a couple examples. Okay, we haven't done any pause the videos in a little while, so I'm going to give you a couple triangles, and I would like you to tell me both names for the triangle. So the first one is going to look like this, and again, I want two names for each of these triangles. I want one name by the angles, and I want one name by the sides. Okay? And so you have 3 choices for each of these. Okay, so the first one, I will put tick marks to indicate how many sides are equal. The second one is going to look like this. Okay, with these sides here equal, this one's going to be different, and we got an angle up here. Okay, the third one is going to look like this. Okay, and the fourth one is going to look like this. Oops, sorry. Okay, and so what I want you to do right now is pause the video, and I want you to fill in a name for the angles and a name for the sides for each of these. Angles, sides, angles, sides, angles, sides. So you should actually have 8 things, and I'd like to actually write them down. Okay, pause the video and then resume as soon as you've got all 8 of these written down. I'll give these letters too, so you can do this while you're. I'll do this while you're writing. Okay, pause me now. All right, let's get started. Okay, let's go. For each of the triangles, we're going to think angles and side. Okay, the first one obviously has a right angle because of the little square box, so it is a right triangle, and none of the sides are equal, so it is a right scalene triangle. The second one, it clearly has an obtuse angle up at the top, so it's obtuse. And it's got 2 equal sides, so it's obtuse isosceles. Okay. The third triangle, again, we can see we've got equal sides here and here. If you look closely at the angles, you'll notice that all the angles are acute. So this one is an acute isosceles triangle. And the last one, if you look very closely, now this one's a little tricky. You've got to look at that one really closely. It's almost a right triangle, but then it would be exactly the same as A. There's no box, and if you look at it really closely, I think you can see that it's just a little bit less than 90, maybe like 87 degrees. So since that's the biggest angle, and it is acute, it is an acute triangle, and this is an acute scalene triangle. Okay, so hopefully that matches your answers. Okay, one more thing. And that is an equilateral triangle. Let's go back to equilateral triangles. So I said all triangles have 2 names. Okay, so an equilateral triangle is kind of special because by its sides we can go further than isosceles. We can actually say it's all the sides are equal. So we'll say it's equilateral. Okay. Now let's talk about the first one. There's really 3 choices for the angles, right? It could be acute, right, or obtuse. Well, in an equilateral triangle, if you take 3 sticks that are the same length and you put them together, you're going to find out that it's also equiangular. It turns out that these angles are all going to be equal as well. Okay, and there's a lot of geometry theorems about this. Well, if that's the case, okay, there's no way to make one of these 3 equal angles a right angle or an obtuse angle. So for equilateral triangles, there really is only one possible choice for what the angles are. They're all going to be acute. Further, if you might know this or you might not. If you add up all the angles in any triangle, it always adds up to 180 degrees. So if it's true that all 3 angles in the equilateral triangle are equal, and they have to add up to 180, if I take 180 and I divide by 3, we'll find out that each of the 3 angles must be exactly 60 degrees. Okay, so equilateral triangles are actually very special. All right, again, quick review. You got 3 different terms by the angles. We've got acute, right, or obtuse based on the biggest angle. And then, based on classifying by the sides, how many sides are equal? Scalene means no sides are equal. Isosceles means at least some of the sides are equal, so at least 2 are equal. Okay, and again, if all 3 are equal, we go further than isosceles and we use the term equilateral. Okay, now, by the way, the isosceles, that can be right, acute, or obtuse. Okay, so both isosceles and scalene have the option to be any of the 3 angles. It's only equilateral that's special. So there's not really, normally, if we have 3 choices for one name and 3 choices for another, there'd be 9 possibilities. But again, because the equilateral triangle can only be acute, we lose 2 of the possibilities. So there's 7 possible triangles. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm going to try to keep this under 10 minutes. So come to class on Monday, ready to talk about classifying triangles and also ready to correct any old classwork that we've done. Have a great rest of your weekend. I'll see you in class. Bye.